Rumpelstiltskin considered himself a keen observer. He could see the points where the curse had twisted the world and twisted the people in it. Many of them were just a sidestep away from their own happy endings. Others, like himself and Snow White, had clearly been a long-term pet project for Regina. She must have really wanted to hurt them. The fact she had made sure they would be happy together was a particularly bitter touch, using their own memories of happiness against them, taking what they had felt for others and cracking it apart to fit her into her own warped idea of vengeance. Even if the curse was broken, those memories would remain. The rest of the town continued on, oblivious. He left his shop as people said about their day. Though he preferred to be in his haven, there was a world out there he had to refamiliarize himself with. He knew their faces, and now he had to match their names in the old world with their names and tales in the new. The cricket was a man once more, though no less conscientious. Geppetto was a woodworker, though Rumpelstiltskin noticed that his puppet child was nowhere to be seen. The fairies, heartless, frigid witches that they were appropriately nuns. The wolf and her grandmother were still together, though at one another's throats as they had never been. The genie, the mirror, still reflecting Regina's delusions on the world. And of course there was the mayor herself, presiding over all of it, with a smile that suddenly took on so much more meaning. She ruled over the town alone, with a rod of iron in a silken sheath, and the only thing that made her human was the boy she had adopted. Cameron Gold had never wondered at her desire for a child. Cameron Gold carried a smothered guilt over a lost child that he never understood. Regina had not planted that memory, but there was enough of Rumpelstiltskin in the man to remember it. Bay's treasures in the shop testified to that. He wished to be a father, but could not bear the thought of the loss, and so could not fault Regina for choosing to adopt. Rumpelstiltskin remembered the forest, remembered the thing she loved most, remembered a name that had seemed inconsequential at the time when the child was delivered to her, the child she cared for with the same single-minded intensity that she devoted to vengeance. The thought of her father brought back memories that both were and weren't his. Before they were married, he had accompanied Mary Margaret to her father's grave in Storybrooke Cemetery, row upon row of polished stones emerging from the grass like blunt and gapped teeth. He had never had cause to go there as gold. He had no family in Storybrooke, no friends, no loved ones until Mary Margaret stumbled into his life. Felt like hooks had sunk into his flesh. If all those who had died in the forest were remembered in Storybrooke's graveyard, there was a name that had to be there. Even if he had the will to keep himself away, his feet carried him there. His cane was gripped so tightly his palm ached, and he walked row after row after row. Most of the graves were neat, kept on order by a tall, slender young man who Rumpelstiltskin wished he did not recognize. No doubt he was named Reaper or something of the kind. One or two of the tombs were marked with flowers. Others had candles long since burned out. The names were not quite familiar, but close enough that he could imagine their owners. Leonard Blanchard, Allison Hatter, Edward Boyd. Name after name ran through his mind, face after face. He let his eyes flick over each grave in passing. He remembered Sir Maurice's name in this world, one of his many debtors, and when he saw the grave marker, he felt as if his heart had clenched in his chest. To make matters worse, there was a rusted circle screwed onto the stone with a faded, water-stained photograph tucked into it. He always believed he would never forget her features, but now when he thought of her, Regina had bled Snow White's features into his memories. Now her cheeks weren't so dimpled, now her eyes weren't so blue. Now her hair was black rather than chestnut. He went down on one knee, reaching out to touch the frame, brushing moss from it. The face within was little more than a pale circle surrounded by dark curls, the details faded by the rain. It no more showed her features than his memory would. It would be a simple thing to go to French's house while the man was elsewhere and take one of his photographs of her, but he had to think logically, practically. He could no more help her than he could undo the curse himself. If Regina knew his intentions, if she saw him seeking tokens to remind him of the one he lost, she would know he had broken from her control and would do her utmost to keep the curse in place, and then he would lose Bay permanently too. He touched his fingers to his lips, then pressed them to the name carved on the stone. It was no more her name than his was gold, but it was the closest he could come to kissing her again. "I won't forget you," he promised quietly. Rumpelstiltskin had only ever loved two people in his whole pitifully long life. He had lost one already. He was not about to let the other slip through his fingers again.